Well, the airplane was trailered to the airport. The wings were put back on, and there was a slight problem with one of the hydraulic lines of the landing gear. That has been replaced. Then there were a couple days of rain, and so today is the first time the engine can be started. We couldn't start the engine before because the airplane was inside the hangar, and that's not supposed to be a good idea. And so today is the day. I've already put fuel in the tanks, not a lot, just a couple and a half gallons on each side. And then I'm going to get into the cockpit, make sure everything appears to be normal as far as their switches and things. And as you can see, the airplane is still tied down. That way I don't have to worry about it going anywhere when I'm playing with the engine. And once I have things organized inside, I'll be getting back out of the aircraft to sump the tanks, make sure there's no debris in the fuel tanks or in the fuel lines. So out I come. It's actually not as difficult as it appears. I'm just taking my time. And I can check the left tank. It's fine. I'm going to check the sump on the right tank. Now that it's fine, I'll actually reach in and turn the fuel line on that side. Turn the fuel line on this side. And there's another sump at the lowest point, which is behind the cockpit, right where I'm reaching. And the last place to check is the fuel strainer. Turning on the main fuel line. It's on the floor of the cockpit. And then we'll check the fuel strainer drain. Just right before it goes to the carburetor. There's nothing in the fuel line. I'm just doing a double check that that's the last place it has to filter itself before it gets to the carburetor. Turn on the switches and we're about ready to go. Here we go. What I'm doing here is I have an electric fuel pump and I'm using it for short burst to get fuel to the carburetor because I didn't want to end up flooding the engine. So it's going to take a couple times, but then she will fire off. There she goes. There it is. Put in make it to 4 p.m. and it actually ended up being a little short, so the prop does need to be adjusted because the pitch is a little bit too coarse for the engine. Which is a normal occurrence when you put one on for the first time. It takes a little testing to readjust it and make it come out like it's supposed to. And there we are. There's our first run. Shut all the switches off. And I'll get out of the airplane. I'm going to open up the cowling here to check for oil leaks, which there were none. No fuel leaks. And a couple of linesmen from the FBO actually witnessed the run, so they'll be walking into the film here in just a second. And overall, it was a very successful run. I'm feeling there is the oil cooler to make sure it is warm, as the oil from the engine routes through an oil filter and then goes to the oil cooler and then back to the engine. And if by some accident the oil lines were reversed, oil filters have like a flapper valve inside that prevent the oil going backwards. And by feeling the oil cooler and the oil filter to make sure they're both warm, and it's the same temperature as the oil sump on the engine, you can tell that the lines are in their right position and that oil has been flowing. Here I'm just checking for exhaust leaks, oil leaks. And here comes the guys from the FBO. I'm explaining to them that the pitch of the prop is a little bit too coarse. Need to change that, which I actually ended up doing after this video. But very successful first run. I'm explaining to them the oil cooler and the oil filter lines because it's a remote oil filter. It does not actually attach to the engine directly. It uses hoses. And how the oil goes through the filter and then through the oil cooler and then back to the engine. So once again, a very successful first run. A few minor issues, but nothing major, and they'll all be sorted out for the next one.